Once upon a time, King Arthur often entered the council chamber with his beloved donkey. The king had immense confidence in his donkey and would frequently praise it before ministers and ambassadors. The donkey, however, would bray continuously without seeking permission. Whenever it brayed, a bright smile would light up Arthur's face, and he would laugh heartily. On the other hand, the ministers' faces were filled with sarcastic amusement, wondering how a king could choose a donkey as his cherished pet. One day, a minister mocked, "This donkey only lacks the ability to speak. If it could talk, it would surely be handed a ministry to run the affairs of the kingdom." Another attendee, seizing the moment, remarked, "The king should hire a tutor to teach the donkey to read and write. Who knows? It might even become a philosopher or a scholar." The king was impressed by the suggestion. That evening, he summoned the kingdom's greatest philosopher and commanded him to teach the donkey to read and write. The philosopher, bemused, looked at the king and replied, "Your Majesty, this is impossible." Even Plato, the greatest philosopher of all time, declared, "Man is a rational animal, but a donkey is not." Angered by this response, King Arthur ordered the philosopher to be imprisoned. Next, the king summoned the wisest poet in the kingdom. Offering him a generous reward, Arthur asked him to teach the donkey. The poet respectfully declined, saying, "Your Majesty, even if you offered me the kingdom's entire treasury, I couldn't teach the donkey. Ignorance is a disgrace, and only a donkey is defined by its ignorance. Now you understand why this task is impossible." Furious at the poet's words, the king had him imprisoned as well. Growing frustrated, the king remembered the kingdom's most renowned scholar and summoned him. The scholar, wise and composed, listened to the king's command. Arthur said, "I want you to teach my donkey to read and write, and I will cover all expenses." The scholar laughed and replied, "Your Majesty, have you forgotten that God created man in his image? He did not create the donkey in his image." As with the others, the scholar's fate was imprisonment. Desperate, the king called for an emergency meeting with his ministers. He declared his frustration at not finding anyone capable of teaching his beloved donkey. The ministers, barely containing their laughter, exchanged mocking glances. Finally, one minister suggested, "Why don't you issue a public announcement seeking an expert in the language of donkeys? Perhaps such a person could teach your pet." Impressed by the idea, the king approved it immediately. The next day, the town crier announced, "By royal decree, 10,000 gold coins will be awarded to anyone who can teach the king's donkey to read and write. Interested candidates should report to the royal palace." The announcement became the talk of the town, with most people laughing at the absurdity of it. However, a man in need of work heard it and decided to present himself at the palace. Upon his arrival, he found the king, his ministers, and the majestic donkey waiting for him. The man greeted the king respectfully, then turned to the donkey with a wide grin and greeted it as well. This amused the king, who asked, "So, you claim to understand the language of donkeys?" The man replied confidently, "Yes, Your Majesty. I am well versed in the languages of animals, especially donkeys." Pleased, the king said, "Very well. I will give you half the reward, 5,000 gold coins. Now, the remaining amount will be yours once the donkey has learned to read and write." The man responded, "Your Majesty, you must also consider the expenses of teaching your esteemed donkey. It will take 5 years to train him." "5 years?" the king exclaimed. "That's too long." The man explained, "Your Majesty, teaching a creature with half a brain is no easy task. It requires patience, nourishment, and care. During these 5 years, the donkey will need food, drinks, medicines if it falls ill, vitamins for better comprehension, and even entertainment to ensure it doesn't get overburdened with studies." The king agreed and handed the man an additional 10,000 gold coins to cover the donkey's expenses. However, he warned, "If you fail to teach my donkey within 5 years, I will throw you in prison." The man accepted the terms but requested that the donkey be moved away from the palace to aid its learning. "The donkey will forget its lessons every time it sees you, Your Majesty," he reasoned. The king agreed reluctantly, vowing to visit the donkey annually. As the man left the palace with the donkey, the ministers stood in disbelief. One of them approached the man and said, "We all know you're lying. Even if you spent your entire life with that donkey, it would never learn to read or write. How do you expect to escape the king's wrath after 5 years?" The man laughed and replied, "In 5 years, either the donkey will die or the king will die or I will die. Until then, I will enjoy the gold and live peacefully."